Welcome to Griffith Observatory and to our special 50th anniversary celebration of the Apollo 8 mission. Now I'm going to do something terrible just to start off. How many of you were alive and remember the Apollo 8 mission? And so that means the vast majority of the people in this room were not around for this experience. And after preparing for tonight's program, I can't believe I was around for it. And as a kid, it all seemed to be like, oh, that's what's happening. But it is an astonishing story and one that we are very, very excited to share with you tonight. I'm going to just say here and for good that we did do this. It did really happen. It was the extraordinary effort of about 500,000 people, all told. And those people deserve to be honored with their hard work for doing something that was just extraordinary for this country and for humankind. I have a little very super high-tech demo to show you. You could be the Earth and hold on to the Earth for me. What's your name?
Lamar.
Lamar. Let's hear it for Lamar. How much more? Oh!
Stop.
That is, so look at the scale of that. That many Earths they had to travel to get to the moon.
Before Apollo 8, the farthest anybody had been from the moon on the scale would be about an inch.
Yeah.
So about there.
So imagine saying, yeah, let's just go to the moon. And it wasn't quite like that, but you will hear a story tonight of extraordinary risk-taking, extraordinary pressure, and extraordinary courage, not to mention, of course, amazing skills and talent in making this all come true.
How many of you have seen a Viewmaster? Okay, so quite a few. Back in the early 60s, that was the VR of its time. It was a 3D slide thing. And one of the things they came out with was Man on the Moon. This came out in 1964. It was a study of what we pictured the Apollo program would be. All right, first of all, it would involve building a gigantic rocket. It would involve 2 spacecraft. One would land on the moon, the other would return the astronauts to the Earth. It would involve somebody stepping on the moon and probably planting the American flag there. It might even involve finding glowing jewels and even water on the moon. It would involve taking off from the moon. It might involve a spacewalk. It would involve coming back to the Earth at more than 25,000 miles per hour and surviving through the atmosphere. It would involve landing in the ocean and getting rescued. And finally, it would involve meeting the president and giving him glowing jewels and water from the moon. But anyway, my point in this is actually not to mock the Viewmaster slide set. Instead, it's actually to show that we actually very early on had a pretty clear picture of what was needed to get to the moon and what our plan was to do it. The idea of sending people into space on a program called Mercury. The next was the Gemini Program. These were the new Gemini astronauts called the New 9.
Pete Conrad did not get the memo on what to wear for the picture, I think.
Yes.
While the Gemini program was still going on, the Apollo program was approved by Congress in the middle of 1961. NASA came up with a design for the Apollo spacecraft that looks like this. That led to Apollo 1, where we would put a crew in the command module. And the crew on board was Ed White, Roger Chaffee, who has never flown into space, and Gus Grissom. Now, during a launch rehearsal in January 27th of 1967, a tragedy struck. A flash fire occurred inside the capsule and took the lives of all 3 astronauts. And all crew tests were canceled. Apollo 2 and Apollo 3 were also canceled. The Apollo mission would start with Apollo 4, and then that was followed by Apollo 5 and 6.
I'd like to just interject. If you look at the dates on that, Apollo 4, the first flight of the Apollo program, November 1967. Our first trip to the moon in December 1968. So look at the pace at which this is happening. It's extraordinary. Just a year, really.
Apollo 4 was the first flight of the big Saturn V rocket, and it was something to actually witness.
Oh, it's terrific! The building's shaking!
Wow.
from orbit, it took a picture of Antarctica and South America.
And notice, the Earth is round. That's the other one I have to say. But Apollo 6 did not go too well.
That's right. So when the third stage separated, it went into a highly elliptical orbit instead of a circular orbit, which was what was needed for the translunar ejection.
So I do want to mention about this engine, because it's critical to the story of Apollo 8, which is coming up. The fact that you need this other engine to take you to the moon and eventually to bring you back. But yes, it did land safely.
This flight was Apollo 7, and we can see the astronauts who were selected for the mission. And the launch was successful. The goals of this mission was to test the new Apollo flight suits and also achieve a docking, and that's the stage 3 with a docking target. The other thing they achieved was the first TV broadcast from space. The quality was really great at the time. They did a successful splashdown. Here they are coming out of the helicopter, and they were very, very happy.
So now we're into August, and we're supposed to make plans for Apollo 7, which went in October, and then another mission following that was Apollo 8 that was going to fly the lunar module.
In just in orbit around the Earth.
Just in orbit around the Earth. The lunar module was not ready. It was overweight, and it wasn't going to make it. And here we are in August. So what they decided to do instead was to pull up the flight that goes to the moon. There were supposed to be other flights before we actually send people to the moon. And remember I said that motor was so important, that rocket, the engine inside of Apollo 6 that was never started a second time, that failed. And they're like, yeah, we think we understand it. We're good. Let's send people on the next one, because they didn't, right? Apollo 6 was the Saturn V. Apollo 7 was putting the first crew of any kind on one of the Saturn Is, but the first crew, Saturn V, hadn't been proven, had this very disastrous flight, and they said, no. We're going to go. It's August 68. Not only are we going to go, but the window is December 68. So we got 5 months. We're just going to do it. So this is the lead-in into December 1968. Apollo had not been very successful. Several failures, several cancellations, and here we just sent our first crew. It wasn't just that it was delayed. There were other. Why did they go forth?
Well, we have to remember that the whole space race happened in a period of time we call the Cold War. The whole purpose of Apollo from the political point of view was to be the first to the moon, right? The CIA actually was picking up some things. The Soviets had a new capsule called Soyuz. That should sound familiar. It's what we ride to space in today, right? Well, the Soyuz was a new capsule. It was designed to actually be able to go to the moon and return people to the Earth. So they rushed the first Soyuz flight, even though it was having lots of technical problems. Sergei Komarov, who was the cosmonaut on board, unfortunately did not survive his trip. The parachute system failed on the Soyuz, and it smashed into the ground at 500 miles per hour.
The configuration from the two launch pads had it such that to get to the moon from the Russian launch pad was an early December launch. To get to the moon from Cape Canaveral was a later December launch. So
right.
If we stayed neck and neck, they would have had a launch opportunity before we'd have. So that leads us to Apollo 8.